Welcome to the Silver Lining Foundation's Finding Pride in Mental Health. My name is Scott Marchak and I'll be your moderator for tonight. This year, Pride is looking a little bit different in light of the current pandemic, but I hope that you are all keeping safe and practicing the proper safety measures. So tonight's discussion is going to be focused on one's mental health, as well as the lived experiences of LGBT persons and how the Silver Linings Foundation is building stronger relationships between those persons and their families. We'd like you to interact with us throughout tonight's discussion. So let us know where you're tuning in from if you're watching this live, and give us a heart react. Also, don't forget to share this live and keep the conversation going using the hashtag SilverLiningsTT. So tonight with us on our panel, we have clinical psychologist, Dr. Khatija Khan, clinical psychologist and organizational psychologist, Ms. Kelly McFarlane, and clinical mental health counselor, Mr. Ryan Merrick. Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
Hello.
All right, so without further ado, let's get right into the first question that I have for you guys. The first question is actually for Ryan. So Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about what Pride means to you?
Okay. To me, Pride is about feeling a sense of confidence, if not confidence per se, a sense of being aware and being happy with who you are, or being, for lack of a better word, proud of who you are and everything that is. Pride and the idea of like Pride Month, I would say, is the essence of feeling comfortable, feeling safe, feeling heard, feeling noticed. The idea of Pride Month to me, or celebrating Pride during that month, is simply being confident of who you are, or being happy to be out there and expressing who you are in a safe environment. A sense of being, having your own safe space, so that's safe, surrounded by that sense of support, and being aware of everyone being aware of who you are and your existence, and just that the unified feeling of this is your recognition, it's okay to be you.
Right. That's really lovely. And can you tell us a little bit about just a brief idea of what the Stronger Families program is about from Silver Linings?
Sure. Before we get to Stronger Families, I would have to tell you a little bit about the essence of safe space, because that's where it came out from. When we talk about safe space and that idea of having a sense of belonging, feeling a place to feel supported, we, Silver Inc. Started off something called the Safe Space Initiative, which is a setting or a group, kind of a group therapy room, support group for teenagers to kind of say to have a space to support who they are, to have a peer support group of voicing your opinions, voicing your views, and talking about the hardships of being LGBT and the pros of being LGBT. And Stronger Families came out from the idea of, after talking to these teenagers, realize you keep going back to households where your parents might not be either very accepting or just on their way to acceptance. They only reached tolerance, or haven't even reached tolerance yet. And they keep coming back to this point of, my parents don't understand and they need help. And so we realized we needed to give parents a safe space also to voice those opinions, to voice those hard conversations, those hard questions that as a supporting parent, you shouldn't really ask, but you need to talk to someone about it. So we gave them a support system also. And their space was called Stronger Families, because in the essence of Stronger Families, it's creating that bond from a safe space for the teens, for the children, a safe space for the parents, and making their family, their primary support system, their support, giving them support also.
Right, right, and it's a really important kind of program to have, especially here in this region where gender isn't really gender and sexuality isn't something that's really understood very well, and it's also important for mental health, which is also something that's pretty taboo here. And you did mention individual and versus group therapy, group consultations, I should say. And at this point, I'd actually like to ask the audience, would you rather group or one-on-one consultations with this Stronger Families program? Let us know in the live chat, and we will get back to those comments in a short bit. And also, if you're watching this live stream, I'd just like to gently remind you to share it and talk to us in a live chat using the hashtag SLFTT. All right, so my next question goes out to Katisha. Sorry, Dr. Khan. So I'd like to discuss a little bit the Stronger Families cycle, particularly cycle 1, and also the change of delivery from cycle 1 to cycles 2 and 3. Can you tell us what were some of the goals and objectives of the program?
Yes, sure I can. So hello, Scott, and hello to all the viewers who are tuning in. First, before I start, I really want to commend the Silver Lining Foundation for having this interactive discussion this evening. I think it is such an important topic, and I think if we could reach out to as many people as we can and their families, that's going to be a fantastic thing, especially during Pride Month. So to answer your question about this first cycle of Stronger Families, so Silver Lining did a lot of groundwork to try and advertise the service and recruit parents, relatives, caregivers for this first cycle. And that wasn't an easy task. So in our culture in Trinidad and Tobago, having group support or support groups rather, or group therapy is not a very common thing. So people aren't accustomed to it. And there were a lot of people who had some apprehension. Well, who else will be there and where is it going to be held and who will know that I'm doing this? So we had to really reassure people that this was something that they could benefit from. And we would do all that we could to preserve their confidentiality, their privacy, and to make it a really beneficial experience for them. So with respect to the objectives of the first cycle, so we wanted to, and Ryan mentioned some of this, we wanted to provide a forum where family members could relate to each other as peers and share some of their concerns that they were having. One of the fantastic things about group interventions is that you get to learn from each other. And you realize, what, it's not just me alone who's struggling with this. If I have a child who has come out to me as lesbian or gay, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do. You're not alone. It's not unique. Nothing is wrong with your family. There are many families who are going through this. So one of the first objectives was to provide this peer forum for parents and family members and to allow them to explore problem solving in a collaborative way. The other thing we wanted to do was to debunk some of these myths, some of the misinformation that people hold in terms of things like gender identity, sexual identity, sexual orientation, sexual behaviors, etc. So it provided a really safe forum for people to explore their ideas. How is your gender identity different from your sexual orientation? Is sexual orientation, are you born with it? Is it fluid? Is it a choice? Is it the environment? As a parent, did I do something wrong? So we also provided that forum to provide some psychoeducation on awareness and knowledge. And finally, this was a space for parents and family members to also acknowledge some of the factors that were weighing on them. So whether it's their own personal health beliefs, whether it's religion, whether it's their other family members who are impacting on their relationship with their child or loved one, we were able to explore these and empower them to be able to support their LGBT loved one in a very healthy way, in a way that's going to promote better mental health and well-being. So I'll pause there, Scott. But that was cycle 1. Let me just tell you a little bit about cycles 2 and 3. So we wanted this program was funded for 3 cycles, but what we found was that after the first cycle, which was a successful run, it was a really great initiative. We had difficulty with the logistics for cycles 2 and 3 in terms of times, venues, locations, just getting all of the details together. And what we decided was that we could not let this resource go to waste. So we decided that we would expand it now and offer individual one-on-one therapy to members of the LGBT community, especially for those who are having difficulties with their families. So the goals for cycles 2 and 3 were more focused on the individual. So we wanted to help them build resilience and build coping, and specifically to help them navigate those relationships with their families, whether it's building a healthy relationship with a supportive family, or for many people who don't have supportive families, how do you navigate that? And finally, one of the goals was also to help them address whatever personal issues that could be rectified with counseling. So for example, if they were struggling with mental health, if they were going through some sort of life adjustment, then this one-on-one therapy could facilitate that. And the great thing about that is, even when the pandemic affected us, we made a very fluid switch to teletherapy so that that service was not affected. So it was a combination of face-to-face and teletherapy. Teletherapy also worked well for people for whom distance was an issue. So if you are based in Point Portland, you didn't have to come up all the way to St. Augustine for therapy. You could join in by phone or through video conferencing. So we completed cycles 2 and 3 earlier this year, myself and Kelly, the other clinical psychologist, and it was a successful wrap as well.
Right. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Khan. And I think people would really appreciate how, you guys have created that safe space and try to make people comfortable, because, mental health is something that can be tricky for people to navigate sometimes because of the stigma, especially when it comes to gender and sexuality, again, because of the notions that we have here in this region about what it means to be male and female and such. So thank you a lot for that. And at this point, I'd actually like to go to the audience again and ask you all, how have you nurtured your mental health during this Pride season? So let us know in the live chat. And if you're tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from. Give us a heart react and keep the conversation going using the hashtag SLFTT. All right. So the next question is for Kelly. So Kelly, we just heard about a lot about cycle 1 and the shift from cycle 1 to cycles 2 and 3 for the Stronger Families program. Can you tell us a little bit about what the general outcomes were of cycles 2 and 3?
Sure. Well, people came in with different issues, as Dr. Khan kind of touched on some of them, whether it was interpersonal issues, intrapersonal, dealing with relationships, dealing with coming out to family members, dealing with prejudice at work, dealing with feeling comfortable about people at work and people in their environment, sort of accepting them, self-acceptance as well, self-esteem issues. It's an amalgam of issues that a lot of your members were experiencing. They were able to sort of talk through that. If there were mental health issues or mental illnesses sort of at the base of some of those things that they were going through, those things were sort of brought up and dealt with, in a healing way. They received psychotherapy, counseling, guidance, that sort of thing. And I would say, at least from the information that I have from the couple of people that I have worked with and so on, that it was quite successful. We would usually sort of review at the end of, let's say, a couple of weeks in, we would review, okay, where did we start? What were your goals? What was achieved? How was it achieved? And what are you going to take from this moving forward to sort of be able to continue your own sort of self-therapy, or continue using some of these tools, continue coping on your own outside of the therapeutic space. So that was a major part of this, I believe. And yes, going through the process of the therapy and building the tools and the resilience and so on, but also making sure that people left that experience with things that they can use on their own.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, Kelly. All right, so just a reminder again, share our live stream if you're watching us, and talk to us live using the chat and using the hashtag SLFTT. Some of our results are in, and 67% of you said you prefer group consultations, while 33% of you said you prefer individual consultation. So if you're interested in being a part of our Stronger Families program, you can reach out to us on our Twitter or Facebook page, that's SLFTT, and Silver Lining TT on Instagram, or you can send us an email at thesilverliningfoundation@gmail.com. All right. So the next question that I have goes to Kelly again. So Kelly, we know that during this time, during the time of the coronavirus, a lot of persons are reporting feelings of anxiety, depression. Mental health is really just a big concern right now. So can you tell us a little bit how important it is to think about mental health during this time, during Pride season, and how do we balance such a happy, festive time with, the backdrop of this pandemic?
Yeah, well, I would first say that we have to think about mental health all the time. There's a slogan that started in, I believe, in the UK, there's no health without mental health. And that is so very true, because the connection between mind and body is proven time and time over. And, but I think the thing with Pride is that it's a time when, there's a lot of coming together. There's a lot of other people sort of sharing their experiences more and sharing things that work for them more. A great time to start building resilience and a great time to start reflecting. But it can also be a time that, as more is out there can be more negative things coming into your environment, especially as you try to sort of express your pride and so on. And so in thinking about mental health, I think yes, we think about our own mental health. We also think about how we can support brothers and sisters and so on in dealing with the things that they're dealing with. And so I think that's why it's so important to have the awareness and that expression of pride at times like these. And for some people, Pride and everything that happens around this time could be a great time to sort of give courage to different things that they've been struggling with and wanting to do. So it's always a good time to think about mental health, but I think right now, especially during Pride, with the specific things that people in the LGBT plus community experience, it's a great time to get support for things, or to recognize that support is out there. Because that's one thing that a lot of times people feel, as Dr. Khan was saying earlier, people feel alone, and or they feel that they're the only ones experiencing this until they start seeing a lot of other things happening. And this is something I've experienced working with people as well, when they're so surprised that other people experience the simplest things, or the most common things that we know are common, so yeah. Right.
Yeah. And you made a really good point about that the mind-body connection, how important that is. And that will help me pivot into my next question, which is for Dr. Khan. But before I ask you, Dr. Khan, I'd just like to ask our audience really quickly, let us know in the live chat, how have you nurtured your mental health during this Pride season? And remember to keep the conversation going using the hashtag SLFTT. All right, so Dr. Khan, can you tell us now a little bit about how some of the adverse experiences that LGBT plus persons face can affect them psychologically? And, just to, specify it a little more, can you tell us a little bit about conversion therapy? What kind of impact does that have on a person?
Okay, so thank you for that question, Scott. And it's really an important one, that we recognize that all of these adverse negative experiences that people from the community face often on a daily basis, they take a toll. So for example, whether it's stigma, whether it's discrimination, whether it's a microaggression, somebody refusing to call you by your preferred name, or somebody making a slur, or reading about a comment, or reading an article, reading a news story that is homophobic or heterosexist, all of these adverse experiences, whether they are minor or they go into the more major, do have an impact on us, because we can consider them as being traumatic. We can consider them as being trauma experiences. And there are a range of reactions that take place. And I want you to think of these as ranging in intensity. For somebody who has had a more traumatic experience, the reaction might be more intense. So we can have psychological reactions where you feel anger, fear, sadness, frustration, etc. But it also affects our brain and affects our bodies. So we heard about that mind-body connection. So, that old saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Guess what? Words do hurt. And they can hurt just as much as sticks and stones. So they do also have an impact on us psychologically and cognitively. So you may find that you have some cognitive symptoms, your ability to concentrate, your memory. You tend to ruminate, so you find yourself dwelling and focusing over and over on the same issue without resolution. Some people can even have more intense traumatic reactions where it seems as though time is slowed down and there's some disorientation and some confusion. People could have flashbacks and intrusive memories of whatever that adverse experience was. And when the trauma reaction becomes more intense and lasting and causes more distress, that can even develop into a disorder, something like a post-traumatic stress disorder, or you can go on to develop depression and anxiety. The other thing I want to say about trauma is it also affects our brain. And that, especially for children and adolescents whose brains are still developing, having traumatic experiences that come from homophobic interactions can affect the brain in terms of how it gets triggered. So you have more heightened emotional reactions to things. Trauma can sometimes short circuit that frontal part of your brain that's responsible for the rational thinking and the problem solving. But when you've been exposed to trauma, your body goes into this fight or flight survive mode. And sometimes it short circuits that thinking and it goes straight to the emotions. So when you get triggered, you feel fear and anxiety, etc. So there are these whole range of symptoms. And finally, I want to talk about stress as well. So the stress of having to deal with discrimination and stigma also can have an impact on your body and physiologically. So it can impact your health. So whether it is you find yourself getting more colds, but also it's associated with things like heart disease and failure among diabetics to control their blood sugar levels. You are more at risk for mental health illnesses. Also, if you have an existing medical condition, then that stress and trauma can make that worse. So you do want to pay close attention to your health, because if you are having a lot of these negative experiences, it's going to make that even worse. So having this holistic understanding about how these experiences can affect you is really important. And you know, it forces you to say, you know what, your mental health is so critically important. Mental health and physical health are inextricably linked, and that these adverse experiences can impact that. Now, Scott, did I use up all the time and I didn't talk about conversion therapy yet?
No, we still have a little bit of time.
Okay.
So what can you tell me about conversion therapy?
Oh dear, Scott. Right. So I'm gonna mind my words here because you know this is a family show too. But what I have to say about conversion therapy is nothing positive. So I, as a psychologist, I hate the fact that it's called a therapy because it makes people feel it's something credible. But conversion therapy, and there are other names for it, reparative therapy, anti-gay therapy, etc. It's fraudulent, it's harmful, it's unethical. It is an awful procedure to have to subject people to. Most importantly, there is no evidence, absolutely no credible evidence that conversion therapy works. And I really would say for families who maybe are struggling to deal with a child or family member who is in the LGBT community and they're not sure and they're thinking, well, maybe they need to see a professional because this is something that we need to pray the gay away. So we're going to send them off to this conversion camp. I do want to let them know that every major professional body globally, every major psychiatric association, every major psychological association, medical associations have all spoken out against conversion therapy, and it has been banned in many states. We're not yet there in Trinidad, but I assure you in years to come, you're going to find that professionals will also be speaking out against it. So whether it's been offered by a counselor, whether it's been offered by a religious body, just say no to that quackery that is conversion therapy. And the last thing I would say about that, the reason to not even think, well, let's try it. What harm could it do? It can do a lot of harm. We just spoke about the impact of trauma. And I would say, do not subject your loved one, even if you're not sure and you want to give it a try. The harm that it causes is going to take a lot of undoing. So if you are confused, speak to a legitimate mental health professional. You have psychologists, you have a mental health therapist on the panel tonight. Find a legitimate, credible mental health professional and talk to them instead.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Khan. And of course, it does conversion therapy. As you see on our banner behind me, conversion therapy does hurt. And this banner was actually used last Pride season to talk about the ills of conversion therapy. And you know, it's so important to speak out against these things and talk about mental health and nurture it, especially for persons who are LGBT plus. And speaking of nurturing mental health, we have some responses from you. We asked you, the audience, how have you nurtured your mental health during this Pride season? T says, I nurture my mental health by playing my favorite Pride anthems like Pride, A Deeper Love by Aretha F. I nurture my mental health by using affirmations to remind myself that I am worthy. Being kind to myself and keeping a lot of support around me nurtures my mental health. Joining online Pride events and cyber partying with my friends nurtures my mental health. Taking pride in my sobriety and finding the courage to love myself nurtures my mental health. And all really amazing contributions. Thank you guys. And all have to do with nurturing mental health and, you know, giving yourself some love, which is a very central part of Pride, I think, just love and acceptance. So thank you all for that. So moving on to the next question, I'd like to ask, what are some of the positive impacts of family acceptance on LGBT persons? So this is an open question. So I think I'd like to start with Ryan, and then maybe Kelly and Dr. Khan, you guys can come in up. Maybe Kelly first and then Dr. Khan. So Ryan, can you tell us what are some of the positive impacts of family acceptance on LGBT persons?
First, without saying the idea of support, we've iterated that, but the idea of for parents, for stronger families per se, of having that support, of that primary support, because even if you can't reach outside on the internet, or you can't find a social circle, or you want to reach a pride parade per se, or join those pride parties, the idea of if you have a set family, that primary set family who understands you, who loves you, they're just not sure how to show it. Having that support helps the idea of pride. Scott, can you repeat the question again to make sure I got everything in this?
Sure. One moment.
No problem.
So can you tell us what are some of the positive impacts of family acceptance on LGBT plus persons?
Right. So when we talk about positive impacts, we talk about the idea of go from teenagers with a supporting, with that support system at home. You can see how that helps development in terms of when they become adults, as Dr. Khan said, and Kelly touched on, is the idea of avoiding those mental health issues, trying to, if we give them a positive support, a positive foundation per se, then we allow for them to express themselves in a more positive way, in a more, give them support with their emotional side, their mental side, as well as their physical side. Because it is so common for us to talk about seeing doctors, seeing hospitals, having regular visits, but we don't really, it's still a taboo, it's still stigmatized to talk about our mental health, to talk about the need to talk to someone, to talk to a legitimate therapist, to talk to a psychiatrist, a counselor, to really nurture the idea of a healthy mind atmosphere as well as a body and brain. So yeah, the positive aspects are countless in terms of the ability of giving children, teens, and young adults a good support, a good foundation to help them branch out to do more than what we expect them to do, more than the conversation is right now. But that takes, like I said, that cultural understanding of and awareness of mental health is important, is just as important as physical health.
Right. Yeah. So Kelly, the same question. Can you tell us what are some of the positive impacts for having that kind of supportive family for LGBT persons?
Well, first of all, for anybody, your family support or your family's acceptance, or your parents being proud of you, your siblings being proud of you, the people that matter most to you being proud of you, loving you, accepting you is so very important. So just living with if, let's say, you hadn't told them, and just living with them not knowing, you're constantly living with that fear of, okay, when might I tell them? How might they treat me? How can I be myself at home? How can I be myself with my family? How can I plan a future in the way that I want my future to go? How can I be myself truly in the way that I want to be myself if they don't know? So first of all, having that support, having that acceptance, first of all, eradicates that problem. So that relief brings with it as well self-esteem, because when you support somebody you love, or you receive support from somebody you love, especially when you're very young, it helps to boost your self-esteem when the world is against you, or other people, you experience any negative prejudice or anything out there. When you have your team, your army behind you, your family supporting you and telling you, no, don't doubt yourself, it's fine, that does wonders for a child or even an adult, but anybody's self-esteem. To be able to empower your family member, to be able to get that empowerment, to know that the people that matter do accept you and do love you. Of course, it helps when the closer and more genuine your relationships are, because you have that support. It helps that, I can talk to you about anything, and that's quite important. So I think the last piece I would add to that probably is in terms of the stress even, is that some people in living with their families and so on, if they assume, and I'm using the word assume because a lot of people just assume that their families wouldn't accept and so on, that stress of being found out, or, because they just want to be themselves. I think one of the greatest things that you see when people receive that support is that type of stress just go away, and everything else, we can deal with everything else. So that support is so important, and that's why it's really important for parents and families Two, as Dr. Khan was saying, not rush to the conversion, but rush to the understanding. Get the understanding. Learn first, what it's all about, what your kids or your siblings or whatever going through, and support them, because that would do a lot for their mental health, their self-esteem, and their safety in the world.
Right. So Dr. Khan, the same question. How what are sorry, let me just give my notes.
Yeah, so how important?
What are some of the positive impacts?
Family support.
Family support, yes, Scott. And I think Kelly and Ryan really covered most of it. Maybe the only thing I could add there is just some of what the research has shown us. And what it tells us is that family rejection can be just as harmful as physical abuse. Because sometimes we think of the physical stuff as being more tangible, but family support is really critical. It's very enabling, very empowering. And what family rejection does is that it's associated with more adverse mental health. You're at greater risk for depression, at greater risk for suicide attempts. Family rejection is also associated with an increase in the risk of illegal drug use, contracting an STI, and I think I mentioned the suicide attempts. And that's one of the areas I think that's very concerning, because we do know that the LGBT community, especially if they're dealing with mental health issues, are at risk for suicide. And so family support can be an incredible buffer against this. So we're seeing then how important family support is and why we do need to empower families to be able to have them have healthier relationships and to help support their loved ones on both sides. So yay to family support and down with the family rejection.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. And really quickly, I would like to ask the audience a question again. But before I do, I would just like to read one of our responses. We asked you, what are you doing this Pride season to nurture your mental health? And Nadi G said, holding affirmative connections, close and surrounding myself with individuals who are like-minded has nurtured my mental health during every season. And again, so important to create that space to just give yourself a little love and just know that it's okay. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'd like to ask the audience again at this point, how do you think that allies can be empowered to join us in the fight for equality? Let us know in the live chat. Also, if you're streaming this live, let us know where you're streaming from. Give us a heart react and keep the conversation going using the SLFTT hashtag. All right, so my next question is actually for Kelly. Oh, sorry, my brain. I'd like to actually ask the panel, starting with Kelly, how do you think that allies can be empowered to join us in the fight for equality?
Sure, we're starting with me, yeah?
Yes,
right. I think, well, my approach to things like that always is ask people what they want. So I would always say, you ask people what they need, how can we help? How can I help? What's missing? But I think more than that, or added to that, is just when you're interested, you just look, you look out and you see what people are experiencing, you see how they're dealing with it, you offer your strengths as you know they are. So for instance, if I'm a therapist, then I might offer my strength in counseling or in advice or in some sort of NGO and things like that. So and then I guess if there are any gaps that we feel we can fill, or that just our presence there can fill, then certainly. Of course, I guess as well, sort of representing and being part of things like these when it matters and when it's time to do it, and stepping up is part of doing that. Yeah.
Right. And Kelly, on that note, can you tell us a little bit about why the support of allies is valuable and impactful to the mental health of LGBT persons in the long run?
Yeah, I think firstly the reach, so that a lot of times when you have groups of people who share a common goal or some sort of commonality, a lot of the information stays in that group or among people who know people in that group. So when when an ally shares and advocates, then people in their groups, it helps to normalize things. It helps to spread information. It helps to let people know, listen, this is something serious. This is real. This is okay. This is fine. We all accept it. It's everyday life and so on. So I think that's a major part of that. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Kelly. So at this point, again, I would like to ask the audience to send us your questions. Anything that you might want to ask Ms. McFarlane, Dr. Karen, or Mr. Merrick, let us know in the live chat. And don't forget to share, give us a heart react, and keep the conversation going using the hashtag SLFTT. So while we're waiting for comments, I have another question, and maybe we can start with Brian for this one, and then Khadija, Dr. Khan, and Ms. McFarlane.
Khadija is fine, Scott.
Okay, Khadija and Kelly, you guys can jump in afterwards. So Ryan, tell us a little bit, what advice do you have for people who are coming out?
Okay. That's a big one. For people who are coming out, I'd say make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. If I have to sum up everything, because coming out is such a personal experience. We may see the day of coming out, we talk about Pride Month, we talk about being aware of your mental health and pride and wanting to be part of the biggest celebration. But some of the dark side about it, some of the hard parts about it is to make sure that you are doing it for the right reasons, to make sure that you're not feeling pressured by either peers, everyone else is coming out, I should do it too, because your situation is different from everyone else's. Each person has their own struggles, their own hurdles to overcome in either their society, their culture, their family. So we have to make sure that they have, as we talk about stronger families, talking about having a support. So my advice for someone who's coming out, that they have a support. Make sure you have a plan A if you're coming out to your family. Make sure you have someone you feel comfortable coming out to first. That just probably they don't even think about it. It's like a friend, a colleague. When I say, if you have a stranger or something online, those chats, Instagram, somebody personal who we talk to, have confidence saying the words, saying I'm gay, I'm bi, I'm lesbian, I'm trans. Have comfort with those words first. Make sure you know your identity before you ask somebody else. Well, before you tell somebody else about it, because we're not too sure how they might receive it. And especially when we talk about parents and support. If you can't, sometimes unfortunately it might not go as well, and that is why you make sure you have a backup plan, as in a friend. You have a plan A, tell your parents, if it all goes well, then that's wonderful. You're one of the lucky ones. And it does happen, but have a backup plan too. What if it doesn't? I have one part of my family doesn't support them. Am I okay with this? Am I okay with that? Do I have someone I can turn to? Because what we don't talk about a lot too, in terms of why we start the Stronger Families, is because it's also a point where parents have their own coming out experience, or as I could say, in lack of better terms. They too have to come to the realization, the awareness, the acceptance of having an LGBT child. And it's a process for them too, as it takes us a process to come out, to realize ourselves, to realize what the words mean, to realize I need to tell someone to release all this built up tension in me, to feel free. It's the same feeling that those who we tell our loved ones have to experience as well. It's like, oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God, I think I'm okay. I need to talk to someone. Yes, I'm fine. And that is hard. that is a very hard conversation that continuously may happen throughout the LGBT experience. I'm sure anyone who's come out can tell you, coming out is not a one-time process. You come out to your family, you come out to your friends, you come out to your colleagues each time. And it's about just building that confidence and that support. So summarize, have a plan A, hope all goes well, but have a plan B just in case. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. And Khatisha, the same question. What advice do you have for people who are thinking about coming out?
Well, you know what? I think Ryan did such a good job, a very comprehensive aspect. If I had to add one thing to that, I would say that, coming out for many people is often a milestone, and it's a very empowering milestone. But one of the things you want to think about is that it may not always go great and fantastic in every aspect. So one of the things you might want to do is anticipate what might be some of the hurdles you'll encounter. So for example, if you come out in your workspace, what might be some of the likely reactions, pushbacks, etc. And then how can you prepare for that? So if the responsive support is supportive and affirming, great, fantastic. That's the best case scenario. But what if you don't get a supportive response? What if it's not affirming? What if you do get some pushback and some stigma, etc.? So I think mentally preparing yourself for that is going to be important, and making sure that you have everything from in terms of what might your response be to somebody who feels they want to comment on your personal life, as well as what actions might you need to take, what coping strategies might you need to put in place. You might have to have your friend on speed dial. Or don't use speed dial now, or just on WhatsApp, on immediate WhatsApp access. So that in case still do, you still that you can access that support when you need it. Okay, so I think I'll end it. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Khan. Kelly, it looks like we're cutting it a bit close for time, so I'm just going to move on. But the next question does go out to you. However, I'd just like to remind our audience, we're still awaiting your responses. We asked you, how do you think that allies can be empowered to join us in the fight for equality? And feel free to send us any other questions that you have for our panelists in the live chat. All right, so Kelly, can you tell me, what does pride mean to you? We heard already from Ryan about this at the beginning. So now we want to hear from you and Khatisha. So can we hear a little bit from you first, Kelly?
Sure. Pride means that esteem, that lack of that lack of shyness, that lack of fear to be who you are, and to that. I want to use the word pride again, but just that conviction, that comfort with yourself, is who you are, with everything that you represent. That self-esteem that we always ask everybody to try to develop. That recognition that you are who you are, and that's worthy of love, and that's worthy of respect and honor. That's what pride means to me.
Right. Thank you. Khatisha, the same question. What does pride mean to you?
Well, Scott, if I could share just a little story. So about, I think it was about 3 years ago, the first Pride celebration in Trinidad. And it was Silver Lining Foundation who invited, then I was on the executive council of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, and they invited us to be a part of it. And I thought, you know what? Yes, of course we'll be there. Of course we're going to show up. And we also showed up the next year as well when SLF invited us again. And for me, whether it's in a professional or personal capacity, Pride is an opportunity to show support, show some tangible support as an ally. Because I think Pride is the month for the LGBT community to own it and to really explore all the ways that you can bolster your identity, bolster your mental health, bolster your network, your resources, etc. And I think for me personally, being given the opportunity to show up and support and to be there in any way that I'm needed is really important. And I think it also helps model that behavior for other allies. Because I think many straight people think, well, what does Pride have to do with me? That's not for me. you know. And no, it is for everybody, because Pride is also about human rights for everyone, and human rights are for everybody. So I think being involved in Pride also, if it's going to make somebody else think, oh yeah, you know, Pride is also should be on my radar. It's also important for me to speak out and support, and not just speak out and support, but speak up when you hear people say nonsense. So all those little microaggressions we spoke about, I think, you know, when people make an off-key remark or use a phrase or a statement, we can say, hey, let me do better now. Try another word in your vocabulary. So I think modeling that kind of behavior for other allies is also a very important aspect to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. And, you know, yeah, you spoke about human rights, and I think it's important to just bring up the topic of intersectionality at this point, and how, you know, it's one thing to be an LGBT person, but then also it's very different from being, you know, a white gay man versus a trans Black woman. So I think that's an important thing for me to bring up. All right, and so we asked the audience, how do you think that allies can be empowered to join us in the fight for equality? And we have some comments. AJ says, we would like them to understand that homophobia affects us all and how we relate and experience the world. DS says, having an open mind and open conversations, encourage empathy and also give empathy. Wow, thank you so much, guys. Ryan, maybe do you have any comments about these responses?
I'm loving it because it's so true. We're talking about what can allies do? Simply get informed, bring about the understanding, amplify voices, as my colleagues, friends, and who I can call friends now, Khadija and Kelly. It's the idea of amplifying voices, amplifying LGBT voices, allies in any sense is knowing audience, knowing what, as Kelly said, knowing what they want, and then listening more than talking. Right now, we have a lot of social media. The cultures are it's very hard to have conversations with our loved ones, with strangers. But the whole idea is to listen more than we speak. The idea of have conversations, encourage, okay, if somebody says something hurtful, what is it that they're not understanding? What is their view? What is my view? Let's find a middle ground where we can push a little bit, find that comfort zone. It's like, okay, that's the understanding. Let's push that a little bit more. Now do you understand? Because unfortunately, it usually takes a very close person for them to really get the idea sunk in. And it's just about creating that atmosphere to have that conversation so that they do feel comfortable having that conversation with someone else. And of course, it's about, like Khadija said, showing up when you're asked, knowing that you have power in being a straight ally, being an LGBT ally as a straight person. You have a voice that is listened to by other straight people who we cannot reach as LGBT folks. And it does take an ally to bridge that gap, to understand our side of it and to understand the other side of it, and to bridge that gap between the two partnerships and have that hard conversation for us. And that way they do their part to amplify our voices. And that's how I love our allies. They really mean what it is.
That's all we're asking for, is that you know, a lot of people, I think, feel like they don't have the right to have a voice in LGBT discussions. But the truth is that we need everybody on our side, and we need everybody to be advocating for our rights. So thank you so much for that.
And if I could just jump in there, Scott, you know, it just occurred to me that this is also about the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. When we look at diversity in the population, so non-hetero people who identify as non-heterosexual account for roughly about 10% of the population. So that means then that there are 90% of the population who could potentially be allies. And if it's 90%, that's an overwhelming majority of people who are going to be more likely to be in positions of power, the decision makers, the change makers, the policy makers, etc. So let's use those positions for good. Listen, as Ryan said, let's amplify the voices and the points of view that are pertinent. Let's get it straight from the source. Let's not assume. Let's not make decisions for people. But let us, because the numbers are so great, allies need to get involved and they need to step up and show up when it counts.
Thank you, Khadija. That's really powerful. And just really quickly back to our audience responses. M says, I think allies can be empowered by getting informed. I think the more that allies are accurately informed about LGBTQ plus issues and needs, the better they can advocate on our behalf and support our causes. Elise says, I think allies can be empowered by getting informed. I think the more that allies are, sorry, I'm reading the same comment. Whoops. But yeah, and it just goes back to what you're saying, Khadija, about being informed and just showing up and giving us that support. So thank you for that, Elise. Thank you for that, Dr. Khan. And we previously asked Kelly and Khadija what pride means to them. But now I'd actually like to go to the audience and ask, what does pride mean to you? Let us know in the live chat. Remember, if you're watching us live, to keep sharing this live using the hashtag SMFPT. Give us a heart reaction and keep tuning in. So as we're actually getting a little close to the end of tonight's proceedings, I'd actually like to invite our panelists to give some closing comments. So maybe we can start with Dr. Khan. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we sign off?
Well, just staying with the theme of pride and out of the mouth of babes, I'm going to quote my little niece again. So at last year's Pride, I took my two nieces with me to the fair and they joined us at the Psychology Association booth. And she turned to me and she said, Auntie, why is it called Pride? So I thought she was asking me to explain LGBT to her. So I was talking to her about, different people like different. I said, no, Auntie, I get that. But why pride? Why do they have to be proud? And I said, oh, I see. And I said, well, baby, sometimes people make them feel bad about who they are. Or they feel guilty or they can't be themselves. So pride gives them an opportunity to be unapologetic, to be authentic, to celebrate. And then she was like, oh, yes, I can see that. How brave. And so, I believe we could always learn from children before their innocence gets corrupted and we turn into adults. And then all the stigma and discrimination sets in that, again, I want to commend SLF for having a panel like this where we can talk about some of these issues. And I hope the audience members, whatever it is that you're dealing with, that you do feel you are imbued with a little more hope, that we do have organizations like SLF, we do have allies, we do have mental health professionals who are LGBT affirmative, who are going to continue to advocate for you. And that, there's an organization called It Gets Better. And so I do want to say that Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean in general, we still have far to go. We have made some gains, but that journey is still ongoing. And I hope that when you think about that journey, notwithstanding what you're going through, that you can still think about it with hope and think about it with pride, and that pride continues long after July has ended. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khadija. And now, Kelly, do you have anything that you'd like to leave with our audience before we sign off?
Sure. I'll pick up from what Khadija said, that we do have far to go, but we're going. And I think that's very important. And I myself am very proud of how far we have come. And that's because of the endurance that the LGBT community has had, and that unwillingness to settle for any less, and I encourage you to continue fighting that fight and gathering allies on the way, because it's all of our fight, and all the very best. And I'm very, very impressed and proud of the SLF Foundation for what you have been doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And now, Ryan, anything to leave with our audience?
And to keep the spirit of pride and mental health, I want for my allies, keep doing your part. You're doing great. Keep the hard conversations happening. Keep bridging the gap. Keep using your power, your positions to really help us by amplifying our voices. By, as Khadija said, the simple efforts of doing small parts of enlightening someone who just might not know better, and have those hard conversations. And for my LGBT folks, I want you to, where we don't see our voices, where we don't see ourselves, I want you to advocate for yourselves as well. Part of the culture is standing up for yourself. And I know it is very difficult in such a difficult culture as such as Trinidad and Tobago, but just being proud, having pride, the idea of pride, not empowerment. The idea of pride is to show that you are not alone, that there are so many people, even for Trinidad and Tobago pride, there's something bigger than just that. There's something bigger than the pride parades. There's a whole movement of human rights. There's a whole empowerment around the world. This is the time to reach out, to bring all those supports and empower yourself with all the energy and the strength of the world to just bring that peace within yourself, and to carry about yourself with pride, carry about yourself with honor. Know that you are okay, and it is okay to not be okay one day, and to reach out for help, and to ask for that help, to seek therapy, to seek counseling, to pay attention to your mental health during these pride times. And basically gather that support, use that essence, that energy of empowerment to simply just speak up for yourself when someone says something that you don't agree with, that you know is hateful, and the culture, society tells you to keep quiet about it because you shouldn't have a say. It is your life, and you do have a say, and you do have a right to speak out for yourself and advocate for yourself and stand up for yourself and others in the process. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I think I'd really quickly like to say what pride means to me, which in a way kind of echoes what Khadija and what all of you are speaking about. But it's really, for me, it's about, taking pride, taking pride in who you are. After, celebrating who you are, after being told for so long that you weren't good enough or that something is wrong with you. To go to that, come out of that place of shame and humiliation and embarrassment. It's about getting out of that space and into your own space. And it's a beautiful, beautiful space where we can feel free to be who we are. So thank you guys for that. And before I get to my closing comments, I would just like to read really quickly some comments from our audience on Instagram. E says, pride means love, peace, and positive energy. S says, pride means to me the ability to freely show who I am and who I love no matter what people say. So really beautiful comments, again, echoing everything that I think we've been talking about tonight. Really the pillars of pride, just loving yourself, acceptance, peace. So thank you guys, thanks for sharing that with us. And with that said, it looks like we've come to the end of our webinar. So I'd actually just like to thank our panelists. Thank you all for, taking the time out of your super busy schedules to come and speak with us. I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in. Thank you so much, guys. And also, mental health is we can't stress this enough. I'm sure all the panelists, they definitely can't stress this enough, but mental health is so important. And if you or somebody feels like you need to reach out to someone for support, we will be posting some very useful resources in the comments that you can have a look at. And also, if you liked this live, please give us a review on our Facebook page. I believe we will also be posting the link in the comments. And that's about it. That's a wrap. Keep following us on all our social media, SLFTT on Twitter and Facebook, and Silver Lining TT on Instagram. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you for tuning in. Ciao for now and happy Pride.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you. Happy Pride.